Hey everyone, welcome back. Before we get started on volume 11, I just wanted to give everybody a heads up as to where I've been for the past month. So I have been going around and showing my new film called Nothing Lasts Forever, Russian Punks in Georgia. It's about the Russian punk rockers who fled Russia upon the full-scale invasion of Ukraine and the mobilization order. It's about their acclimating to Georgia, to a new place, a new language, new culture, etc., etc. The movie is now free on YouTube, so if you're interested in watching it, go check it out. It's free. You know, I'm interested in hearing your feedback, and thank you if you go and watch it. So without further ado, here is volume 11 of Lenin in 45 volumes. The first Russian Duma opened on the 27th of April and introduced bills that the Tsarist ministers were unwilling to accept, such as bills related to agrarian reform and workers' salaries. As a result, the Tsar dissolved the Duma in July 21st, 1906, demonstrating to radicals like Lenin that the legislative reform promised by the October Manifesto was indeed a sham. The joke was on the Tsar this time, though, because the second Duma saw even more radicals get elected. About 20% of the seats were taken by socialists and socialist revolutionaries. The Tsar and his ministers could not maintain a working relationship with this Duma, so in response, the second Duma was dissolved on June 3rd. Finally, the real coup occurred when a new electoral law passed through the staunchly pro-monarchist minister Pyotr Stolypin and the Tsar, in which 60% of electors went to wealthy landowners, 22% to peasants, 13% to merchants, and a measly 3% went to the urban proletariat. So much for Russian democracy there. So this volume, which covers June 1906 to January 1907, Lenin is wrestling with the role that the party needs to play in this Duma debacle. We see him going after people like Ivan Goromykin, the wildly unpopular prime minister who was replaced by the more ruthless and effective Stolypin. At this point, even the liberals were dissatisfied with the Tsarist regime, and in July they draft the Vyborg Manifesto, calling on all Russian people to engage in passive resistance to the government. The cadets, the liberals, are raised, and the regime places heavy restrictions on political expression once again. Stolypin was an enormously successful minister for what he was trying to do. In August 1906, he passed a land reform bill, first by creating a land bank, and in November he declared that public peasant land may be bought by private buyers, which effectively will increase the number of kulaks, that is, wealthy landowners. All of this is important context to understand where Lenin's thoughts and concerns were at the time. In Useful Polemics, for example, he argues that the government can't hope to court or pacify a group like the peasants without actually hearing them out. It's not enough to just engage in polemics with people to say that they're wrong. In the Unsound Arguments of the, quote, Nonparty Boycotters, Lenin argues that it is vital that social democrats work with groups like Railway Workers Union and Teachers Union who are non-party affiliated. And even though they want to boycott the Duma outright, the Social Democrats as a party need to use boycotting as a political tool, not just as a form of protest. In the Dissolution of the Duma and the Tasks of the Proletariat, Lenin says that the recent dismissal of the Duma demonstrates that the legislative body lacks not just the ability to legislate, but it lacks power altogether, and is a reminder that the task is not to achieve constitutional monarchy, as the cadets want, but a full abolition of the autocracy. For Lenin, legislative ability pales in comparison to true power. This can only be achieved through an armed uprising. The Mensheviks want to use the Duma as an organ for convening a constituent assembly, and Lenin said that's impossible so long as the Tsar holds the power to dismiss the body, the Duma. So when it comes to guerrilla warfare, communists often turn to Che Guevara. But actually, Lenin wrote about it in 1906. He says that because Marxism does not bind a group to any form of struggle, but rather understands it as socially and politically contingent, Marxists must accept all forms of struggle. Presently, social democracy recognizes parliamentarianism and trade unions as a form of struggle, but in the past it was insurrection, barricades, and the mass strike under certain conditions. Terrorism was even a tactic employed by intellectuals of old, while today workers employ guerrilla warfare. And we might think here at this particular moment of a change in Lenin's thinking, whereas in previous years he was very much against the use of terrorism by the Narodniki and other social revolutionaries. Now he's willing to say that actually there are moments when terrorism is the main form of struggle that we can accept. So it's worth keeping in mind and paying attention to these moments in which Lenin's thoughts form. In Social Democrats and Electoral Agreements, Lenin confronts members of his party that advocate for creating blocs in the Second Duma elections. Some Mensheviks and radicals sought to ally themselves with liberal parties in order to push the Duma to reforms. Lenin is against this, not because it's useless, but because conceptually the Bolsheviks approached the parliament through the framework of class struggle, and these other groups don't. This means that they can ally themselves around certain points, but cannot enter into full blocs with groups that do not have their end goal, the revolutionary struggle and the overthrow of autocracy. In the Crisis of Menshivism, according to Lenin, this crisis is that since 1903, Mensheviks have been promoting slogans and positions that have been proven wrong, while the Bolsheviks have maintained a steadfast militant position. The effect of the Menshevik failure throughout this time is a widespread disillusionment, first with participating in the Zemstvo elections in 1904, then in the Boligan Duma in 1905, and by 1906, the Mensheviks seemed completely despondent, having no faith either in the Duma or the revolution. So Lenin is drawing a contrast between the wavering tactics of the Mensheviks and the steady commitment to revolution of the Bolsheviks, saying that one is leading to a general frustration with politics, and the Bolshevik position is not. Finally, in the Social Democrats and the elections in St. Petersburg, Lenin describes how a conference in the capital reignited the dispute within the party. A conference was called to settle the question about whether or not to enter into agreements with liberals. The Mensheviks, who had a minority of voters, wanted to join with the cadets on some issues, while the Bolsheviks, in majority, rejected that. In response, the Mensheviks walked out of the conference, which Lenin pointed out obviously served to benefit just the cadets, who saw it as a minor victory. In fact, the cadets were thinking, hey, so long as some of these Russian Social Democrats are walking out and seem to be splitting with their party, we win. They're going to side with us. So thanks for listening. Until next time.